Positive and negative thoughts. If you've ever wondered why it's so much easier to live in a negative headspace than it is to live in a positive headspace, try to think of it as the difference between weeds and grass. If you've ever been a homeowner or through your experience at living at home before you moved out, if you've ever tried to get grass to grow in a stubborn yard, it takes so much work. You have to plant the seed, you have to use fertilizer, you have to make sure you water it X amount of times a day, every day, precisely. You have to make sure that the section that you are trying to get grass to grow has enough sunlight. There's just all these things that have to line up in succession, daily, consistently, just to get that little bit of grass to grow. But on the flip side, have you ever had to do anything to get weeds to grow? Weeds will grow just despite of you. Weeds will grow through cracks in the concrete. Weeds will come up through the underside of your house, in mud puddles, in dank areas where there's no sunlight. Weeds require no maintenance and no effort. You'll just be walking around your yard and there'll be weeds popping up, those little thistles that sting you. Nobody plants seeds for weeds and thistles, but they pop up all the time, and they are so hard to get rid of too. They're just so persistent, they're so resilient, they're impossible to get rid of. Negative thoughts are like weeds. They require no effort. They require no help, no work. They just flood your mind. It is not hard. It takes zero work, zero effort to live in negative thoughts in a negative headspace. And conversely, it can be very hard sometimes to live in a positive headspace, because living in a positive headspace requires a lot of work, a lot of consistency, a lot of time making sure that you are working towards keeping yourself in a positive headspace. And it is very easy to get frustrated and spiral back into a negative headspace, because being negative takes no work, takes no effort. It almost seems like that's where our body and our mind just wants to go. Sometimes it just happens so fluidly. So if you're ever getting frustrated, just try to understand the difference between positive and negative thoughts, and it takes no effort to cultivate a negative mind, but it does take work, consistency, persistence, dedication, awareness to cultivate a positive headspace. But once you spend the time to cultivate that positive headspace, it does get easier to stay there. It does get easier to maintain. Just like in your yard, once you get that grass to grow and you've taken care of it for a while, you've nurtured it, you've given it everything it needed, at some point it just becomes self-reliant. There's also patches of grass in your yard that you never had to do any work towards. But there are patches of a yard where grass does not want to grow, and you have to do everything in your power to get that grass to grow, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. But once it grows, once it's stabilized, it'll be there for you. And then the level of maintenance that it requires after that, after you've established it, then the level of maintenance drops down lower and it's easier to maintain. So just remember that if you're frustrated or you're spiraling or you keep feeling yourself falling back in that negative headspace, just remember, weeds.